These are some of the most genius advertisements of all time. A German company that sells cleaning equipment used its power washers to create this incredible image of Godzilla on a Japanese dam. BBC's billboard for their Dracula series may have confused drivers during the day, but the true genius behind it became clear by the night. To promote a sale, clothing company Superette created benches with etched lettering to temporarily brand people with their ad. Ancient Greek prostitutes would often advertise via their shoes, which imprinted the words "Follow me" in the sand. This brilliant 1960s Coca-Cola ad was made by spreading grains for pigeons in St. Mark's Square in Venice. The bug repellent company Orphea used adhesive to turn their billboard into a massive mosquito trap, eventually revealing the spray. The 3M company, which produces bulletproof glass, put $3 million inside a glass box at a bus station with the slogan, "If you can break it, you keep the money." After 24 hours, not a single person managed to break it. Iconic actor Jack Nicholson has faced his fair share of legal controversies over the years. In 1996, he reportedly assaulted an unnamed Hollywood socialite at a party and ruptured her breast implants. Then that same year, he allegedly promised a prostitute named Catherine Sheehan $1,000 for sex and then assaulted her when she asked for the money. Sheehan claimed that Nicholson promptly grabbed her by the hair, thumped her head on the floor, and then threw her out of his house. She received a $40,000 settlement, but later argued that this was insufficient to cover her injuries, including brain damage, which she said was actually killing her. In 1849, Henry Box Brown escaped from slavery by shipping himself in a small wooden crate from Virginia to Philadelphia. Despite the instructions on the box of "handle with care" and "this side up," carriers placed the box upside down or handled it roughly several times. 350 miles and 27 brutal hours later, Brown stepped out of the box a free man and went on to become a magician. When later asked why he went to such an extreme to escape slavery, Brown was quoted saying, "If you've ever been deprived of liberty as I was, you cannot realize the power of that hope of freedom." Morbid Facts, Part 541. In 2013, Rain Periwinkle was shopping for clothes at the dollar store with her 3 daughters when an older man named Donald Smith approached them and offered to buy them all clothes at Walmart. Desperate for the favor, the family got into his van and shopped with him for the next 2 hours. At some point, Smith offered to buy them burgers at the in-store McDonald's, and Rain's 8-year-old daughter Cherish went with him. But after they didn't return for more than 30 minutes, Rain called police, who were immediately concerned. It turned out that Smith was known to police as a local sex offender with a long criminal history of assaults, and he'd just been released from prison 3 weeks prior. The next morning, Cherish's lifeless body was found in a nearby creek. It's believed that Smith bound her in the back of his van before assaulting and strangling her to death. During Smith's trial, the jurors were in tears after being shown the crime scene photos, and even the medical examiner had to request a break. The 56-year-old Florida man was eventually sentenced to death for the heinous murder. In 1966, James Meredith, the first black man to attend the University of Mississippi, planned a one-man, 220-mile march against fear to encourage black people to vote. But despite a police presence just 2 days into the march, James was shot in the neck, back, and head by a white supremacist. He was quickly rushed to the hospital and ended up surviving his wounds, while his attacker only received 2 years in prison. Later that same year, James completed the march, by which point over 10,000 people had joined him. James is now 91 and still lives in Mississippi. Depression-era gangster John Dillinger survived a shootout with the FBI, robbed 24 banks and 4 police stations, had plastic surgery to change his face and remove his fingerprints, escaped from prison using a wooden gun, and led the government on a year-long chase that cost them 4 times the amount he had ever stolen. After Dillinger was finally shot and killed by the FBI in 1934, bystanders rushed to the theater where he was killed to soak their handkerchiefs in his blood, while thousands stormed Chicago's morgue to have their photos taken with his corpse. When Brian Spencer was called up to play in his first NHL game in 1970, he told his father Roy to watch the game that night since he knew he'd be interviewed between periods. But when he couldn't find a broadcast of the game, Roy drove to the nearest TV station in a fury and held the staff at gunpoint, ordering them to broadcast the Maple Leafs game immediately. The station complied, but as Roy was leaving the building, he was confronted by Canadian police and eventually killed after a standoff. The hockey player's life would end up spiraling out of control, as he would also be killed in a shootout after trying to rob his crack dealer. Wow, nice family, huh? During a hunting trip in 1913, race car driver Camille Janatsky hid behind a bush and made animal noises to prank his friend before he was promptly shot. He was rushed to the hospital but died on his way there, fulfilling his own prediction that he would die in a Mercedes. In 1970, U.S. Air Force pilot Captain William Schaffner was ordered to follow a UFO over the North Sea when he ended up vanishing without a trace. A few weeks later, Schaffner's aircraft was found by divers and recovered from the sea. Strangely, its cockpit was sealed and the ejector seat was intact, but Schaffner's body was nowhere to be found. In 2006, 26-year-old Illinois teacher and wrestler Samson Shelton admitted to police that he raped a 17-year-old student before choking her and tossing her body into a wooded area. He then put a belt around her neck to make it look like she was strangled and left her for dead, after which Shelton went line dancing with friends. Suffering from brain damage and a broken neck, the teenager survived but had to relearn how to swallow, walk, and talk. But despite his heinous crimes, Shelton was released on parole just last year after serving out 17 of his 20-year prison sentence. In 2008, a train traveling 70 miles an hour struck and killed an 18-year-old man who was running across the tracks and apparently didn't realize how fast the train was moving. The impact flung the man's body over 100 feet, and his flying body parts knocked a 58-year-old woman to the ground, breaking her wrist, shoulder, and leg. The woman later sued the man's family on the basis that, if you did something as stupid as this guy did, you have to be responsible for what comes from it. If you were born prematurely, you can thank this man for your life. In the early 1900s, most physicians believed that premature babies were weaklings that were unfit to survive into adulthood and therefore not worth saving. But a sideshow entertainer named Martin Cooney decided to change that with his innovative incubators he called child hatcheries. He would display premature babies at amusement parks around the world through his exhibit called the Infantorium, where visitors could pay 25 cents to view a room full of glass boxes containing tiny babies. Cooney would use the earnings to work with nurses and doctors to do everything he could to keep the babies alive. His goal was to demonstrate to the public that premature babies could be saved with proper care. Through his efforts, Cooney saved over 7,000 lives, and by 1943, nearly every hospital in America had one of his incubators. His work completely changed the public's perception of premature babies and significantly contributed to the development of modern neonatal care. In 1987, North Korean spy Kim Hyun-hui blew up Korean Air Flight 858, killing all 115 passengers on board. After failing to take a cyanide pill afterwards, she told interrogators it was a direct order from Kim Jong-il that she had no way of backing out of without being killed. The woman was originally sentenced to death, but later pardoned by the South Korean president, who said she was merely a brainwashed victim of the real culprit, the North Korean government. Hyun-hui ended up marrying one of her interrogators, and they live happily ever after with their 2 children. While recording the audio version of his book Charlotte's Web, it took author E.B. White 17 takes to read the death scene of Charlotte. He's said to have walked outside for a breather, come back in, and started crying again every time he got to that moment. In 1184, the King of Germany was conducting a meeting with his noblemen on the 2nd floor of a church when the floor suddenly collapsed. The king, whose seat was on a separate section that didn't collapse, watched in horror as 60 of his noblemen drowned in the cesspit located below that hadn't been emptied out in years. Just last year, a 23-year-old man died from a catastrophic spinal injury while playing at a Topgolf with some friends. In what was described as a prank gone wrong, his drunken friends had pushed him off the platform, causing him to miss the safety netting and fall 12 feet directly onto his head. In 1990, a flight heading from Medellin, Colombia to New York City crashed onto a hillside after running out of fuel, killing nearly half of the passengers on board. While being treated for serious injuries, 2 of the male passengers were arrested when ER doctors found baggies of cocaine that they'd swallowed and attempted to smuggle. Both men were sentenced to 6 years to life in prison. The British Pet Massacre was a week-long event in 1939 during which an estimated 400,000 cats and dogs, 1/4 of England's pet population, were killed out of fear of them eventually being gassed or left behind during an evacuation. Almost immediately afterwards, the event was recognized as completely unnecessary, stemming from social panic from the impending war and people seeking a way to feel like they were contributing to the war effort. None of the fears that led to the massacre actually ended up materializing. In 1983, Carla Faye Tucker murdered a couple with a pickaxe while attempting to rob them, striking each of them more than 20 times and later saying she felt a sexual thrill with each blow. Tucker was sentenced to death for her crimes, but after converting to Christianity during her time in prison, there was a worldwide campaign to spare her life, even involving Pope John Paul II and the brother of one of her victims. However, Texas Governor George Bush ultimately blocked the appeal, saying, "The gender of the murderer did not make a difference to the victims," and Tucker was executed by lethal injection in 1998. South Carolina woman Mary Wilson was using her blow dryer when she suddenly passed out with her hand on top of it. The dryer continued blowing hot air directly onto her skin for at least 20 minutes, causing third-degree burns all the way to the bone. Wilson was rushed to the hospital, where doctors found nerve damage so severe they had to amputate her entire hand. The yellow outline is the size of SeaWorld's parking lot. The green dot is where orcas will spend their entire lives. Children's entertainer and YouTuber Stephen John, aka Blippi, hasn't always been so family-friendly. He began his career as a gross-out video creator under the name Steezy Grossman, and would post shocking videos of himself performing grotesque acts across illicit websites. Most infamously, he performed the Harlem Shake in 2013 while standing unclothed on a toilet and defecated all over his unclothed friend. Despite Steven's regret and extensive efforts to have the video removed from the internet, it can still be found rather easily. Don't try to find it. Please don't. Oh my god, why did I watch it? What the fuck, Blippi? In 2013, unemployed 30-year-old Princeton graduate Thomas Gilbert Jr. shot and killed his hedge fund manager father just hours after being told his $1,000 weekly allowance would be cut down to just $300. He was sentenced to at least 30 years in prison. A Japanese pilot who bombed a town in Oregon during World War II returned 20 years later to present his family's 400-year-old sword as a symbol of regret. His daughter said that if he'd received a negative reaction, he would have used the sword to perform seppuku on himself instead. When Robin Williams appeared on the Inside Actors Studio in 2001, an audience member laughed so hard at one of his jokes that he developed a hernia and had to be rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. In 2012, a movie theater in Beirut was raided for showing K-porn, and 36 men were arrested and subjected to anal examinations to determine their sexual orientation. In Lebanon, people can be charged with intercourse contrary to nature, specifically intercourse that involves anal penetration, and can receive up to a year in prison. In the past few decades, some morbidly obese patients have been sent to zoos for MRI and CT scans because standard hospital machines can't accommodate their weight. Zoos have bigger machines designed for large animals, making them practical solutions in these extreme cases. Chicago's Iroquois Theater was advertised as absolutely fireproof when it first opened in 1903, but the building only lasted 37 days before being destroyed by a massive fire that killed 602 people, in the deadliest single-building disaster in the United States until 9/11. Last year, Wisconsin elementary school teacher Madison Bergman faced 10 felony charges for having an inappropriate relationship with her 5th grade student. Investigators were shown disturbing screenshots of their text conversations, in which Bergman would talk about how much she enjoyed making out with the young student. The two also exchanged over 100 letters, love notes, and artwork over several months. She was reportedly still graping him up to 3 months before she was supposed to get married to her fiancé. Bergman has pleaded not guilty to all 10 counts. Ohio sex worker Linda Lassess prompted a multi-state public health alert after police discovered she'd slept with more than 200 clients while knowing she was HIV positive. Officers worked hard to contact her clients and suggest getting tested so they could seek the proper treatment. Randy Woodfield was drafted by the NFL to play for the Green Bay Packers in 1974, but was soon cut from the team due to a series of indecent exposure arrests. He would go on to become the I-5 killer and is believed to have been responsible for over 40 murders throughout the early 1980s. Bodybuilder Denise Rutkowski was once the runner-up for Miss Olympia in the mid-90s, but several years of steroid and drug abuse have led to quite a tragic downfall in her appearance. Someone brought this to a Mexican robotics competition and was disqualified immediately. Instead of improving working conditions and wages, Foxconn installed these safety nets throughout their locations in China to prevent workers from taking their lives. Foxconn is one of the world's largest contract electronics manufacturers and the largest producer of iPhones in the world. For 37 years, the mother of St. Louis man Adam Smith told him to never touch the wrapped box in their freezer, claiming it was filled with important relics from her wedding, including the topper for her cake. But when she passed away in 2019, Smith decided to finally investigate the box. And what he found was far more disturbing than he ever could have imagined: a pink blanket wrapped around a mummified dead baby. Very little is known about the infant other than that he was less than 1 year old, was wearing clothes from the 60s, and wasn't murdered. Smith remains haunted by the idea that it was likely the corpse of his baby brother that he never knew about.